Dischord. The John Alvis Sessions, Book 0. Written by Tom Dell'Aringa. Narrated by Connor Brannigan. Chapter 1. Contraband. Delilah Bridge. "I'm going to kill Giorgio," muttered privateer pilot John MacAlister as he slowly dropped into the pilot's chair of his cargo hauler and scrubbed at his free-floating sandy blonde hair. A zero-G cup floated above him, having just been emptied of whiskey. Fortunate Dance, a jazz compilation by Jimmy Jellyfingers, played in the background on the ship's allo disc. Alvis, a humanoid robot known as an Artie, sat beside John at the cramped bridge console of the Delilah. His white composite skin was scuffed and worn, revealing streaks of silver along the edges. The human likeness ended at its oval-shaped head, featuring two blue, softly glowing circular orbs for eyes and a speaker box where a mouth should be. The robot turned to face John. "In the brief span of our partnership, you've been outmaneuvered in every negotiation. Were I capable of smell, I believe you'd reek of strategic failure." John snorted. "I keep telling you we're not partners. You're my Artie. I didn't ask for any commentary either. I'm trying to make this damned cargo hauling gig work, but the fat bastard's not making it easy." In frustration, he slammed the console, triggering the auto log. "Note, pilot has an emotional outburst at 1432, jeopardizing a safe docking approach." John gritted his teeth and glared at the forward view screen that showed their trajectory to the moon space dock port Vallo, where he had to clear his shipment with customs. "Everything is an emotional outburst with you," said Alvis. "No wonder you were dismissed from the Star Corps and running sketchy moon runs. Don't you humans do strange breathing exercises to calm down when you're upset? Try one of those." John glared at the Artie. He thought the robot was a fantastic find that might reverse his luck, but the damned thing was a bloody irritant, seemingly knowing exactly how to push all his buttons. "You don't know shit about me. And breathing exercises? You know what would calm me down? My Artie being useful. Why didn't you inspect the cargo and look for anomalies or whatever?" "You informed me in no uncertain terms to do only what I'm told, and you did not tell me to inspect the cargo." "That's because you kept wandering around at night, screwing with the ship and waking me up. I didn't mean to stop providing useful information, nitwit." "I need something to do while you snort and drool all over yourself. I've been familiarizing myself with this pathetic ship. As for useful information, I informed you not to trust a notorious criminal boss on the moon." John pinched his nose. "Gee, that's some amazing insight. We're lucky the cargo shifted and I had to resecure it, or I'd have never discovered that container full of pulse weapons." "Yes," said Alvis. "It is a good thing you chose to nap on the console, forcing an unscheduled course change to avoid a collision with the nickel nibbler. That was indeed, what was the word? Lucky." John squinted at the Artie. "That's not funny." "I could not agree more." "I wasn't sleeping. I was listening to the hum of the ship, ensuring the impulse drive wasn't failing." Alvis turned his glowing eyes toward John. "Not big on accountability, are you?" John realized he'd been drawn into yet another argument with his new Artie and was wasting time. "Never mind. We either risk customs finding the illegal container or eject it, hoping nobody notices before we dock for inspection. We need to decide quick."
"Maybe you should call a lawyer to better understand the ramifications of each."
"I can't call a lawyer over public wideband comms to discuss contraband, you putz. Someone will pick it up, probably Giorgio. With my luck, he's watching our every move." John leaned back in the pilot's chair and crossed his arms, staring at the cargo manifest on one of the forward screens.
"Ejecting the cargo would not only constitute destruction of property, but also illegal dumping," said Alvis.
"I am aware of that," said John.
"And if you are tied to the dumping, you'd be charged with endangering space navigation."
"Also aware, and my license will be in jeopardy, so I guess that's a no-go." He rubbed the side of his chin. "But if I hide the weapons somewhere on the ship, our manifest won't match the shipping record from Earth, and customs will notice the discrepancy, which means fines, seizure of goods, and worse problems, including telling Giorgio I dumped the contraband he snuck on my ship."
"I told you to let me find the jobs," said Alvis.
John scoffed. Nobody's giving some ancient, uppity arty the time of day, let alone a job. We're out of time. Our only hope is that customs won't pick us up for a random inspection. After all, we're just shipping cheese. Delilah, this is Customs Control on Port Vallo, crackled the comm. You've been selected for a random shipment inspection. Dock at Cone Alpha 6 and await further instructions. Please acknowledge. John sat staring out the viewport at the port dock, which was getting larger on his screen. Cargo ships, loader drones, and inspector bots danced around the large structure in an organized, frenetic dance. I hate my life. Alvis nodded. I also hate your life. John shook his head slowly, his face reddening. I'm not sure what is worse, being in this situation or sitting next to this scrap of mouthy trash. Delilah? Said Customs Control. John tapped the comm. Acknowledged, Control. Chapter 2. Bite the Bullet. 3 days ago. They were out of options. John stood on the bridge staring at a display screen with a long list of repairs needed to keep the Delilah in working order. Replace faulty hydraulic actuator on cargo hatch, 800 units. Bent support arm on forward landing strut, 1,500 units. New beverage synth, 400 units. Jimmy Jellyfinger tickets? The list went on. It was all wishful thinking. He turned to glance at the worn control panel. There was only enough fuel for one more run. If he didn't get a job soon, he would be forced to sell the ship and go on basic income. That is not happening. I'm not going to turn into some hoosh-injecting passage pauper on the moon. His mag boots clacked on the deck as he turned to look out the main viewport, where he saw the vibrant sphere of Earth's swirling blues and whites set against the deep black of space. It starkly contrasted the moon's barren gray surface, scattered with industrial complexes, mining equipment, and habitable domes. This isn't working, Alvis, he said aloud, turning to the robot just inside the bridge hatch. To which of the long list of things that don't work on this ship or in your life in general are you referring? Asked the arty. This! John banged on the bulkhead, ignoring the insult. Trying to get freelance cargo jobs. Nobody will talk to us about a legitimate job since I have no experience or reputation. When they find out I've been discharged from the Star Corps, that makes it even worse. Maybe the solution is yet another cup of coffee. You've consumed 11 today. No wonder you're on edge. Exactly how many coping substances are you leaning on to prop up your crumbling life? Ha! Said John, his left eye twitching. Coffee, my ass. This damn synth coffee is mostly oat milk. If I wanted oat milk, I would have oat milk. Have you been able to fix the Bev synth yet? The Bev synth, like most equipment on this poor excuse for a ship, is a low-end model with a known defect in the mixing chamber. It leads to a poor blend of the ingredients, prioritizing the milk substitute over the coffee concentrate. You're stuck with coffee-flavored oat milk until you get a replacement part or upgrade the unit. Wonderful. Nothing works on this ship, including us. John looked at the arms on his blue and orange jumpsuit, now devoid of the Star Corps patches and emblems. He frowned, knowing the decision he was about to make was the last thing he wanted. Unfortunately, I think I need to try the less-than-legal route to get some experience and earn some money. If I could get in with one of those underworld bosses on the moon, we could get some well-paying gigs. Then I can use the capital to buy into my own shipment. I must strongly advise you against that course of action, said Alvis. Then what? I need work, shouted John, gesturing wildly. Don't you get that? It looks like this is the only way we can make units, so get on board with the program. You're my arty. Do as I tell you. I see. I shall add this to the long list of your self-sabotaging behaviors. Alvis pretended to type something in the air. Refuses advice from talking machine designed to keep him alive. Yeah, said John, dismissively waving a hand. I've heard about this guy Giorgio. He's got guys in the slums of one of the older domes, Whitson, I think. The area is called the Bones, if I remember correctly. The Bones is known as a dangerous area mostly populated by criminals, said Alvis. They'll eat you for lunch and likely dismember me for dessert. Please, said John. No two-bit moon junkie criminal is going to touch us. I was a captain in the Star Corps. I can handle some Hoosiers in the bones. It's time to go there and convince one of Giorgio's guys to give us a job."
"Statistically, crime does not pay," said Alvis. "There are several open positions on the lunar colony for waste disposal technicians. You're always going on about what a great pilot you are. You could pilot one of those nifty sanitation drones through the sewers."
John slowly turned to look at Alvis. "I feel like you're trying to be funny." "Well, you're not." "But," John made a show of thinking, then pointed at the arty, "maybe I can have you reconfigured into a drone to pilot through the human waste jams, or would you prefer to get me some useful information on Giorgio?"
Alvis stood a little straighter. "While I do not respond to threats, I will see if I can pull some data on Giorgio for you."
"A wise decision." Alvis spent several moments compiling data on the known criminal.
"Maybe we should find someone more moderate. Although never convicted, Giorgio Kakouris has been indicted multiple times by the Moon Authority. The charges include importing illicit goods, water theft, food market manipulation, and data piracy. He is known to be sly and charismatic. The streams often credit him for making the Moon Authority look weak and ineffective. Authorities have consistently failed to secure any convictions against him."
Alvis paused for a moment.
"He sounds like a person who would enjoy making a fool out of you. Maybe this is a good idea."
John scoffed and sat in the pilot's chair. "Nobody makes a fool out of Johnny Boy. Giorgio is winning the game that everyone else is losing. I say we hitch a ride on his success. If this doesn't end with me floating in a body bag. Strap in. Next stop, Whitson Dome." Chapter 3. The Bones. 2 hours later, John and Alvis had left the well-lit, orderly main domes of the moon colony for the grittier sub-domes owned by private interests. Once a promising hub, Whitson had developed into a sprawl of cut-rate shops, petty crime, and the desperate poor. Rusted and grimy shipping containers clogged its tangled tunnels, stacked and retrofitted into makeshift homes for shippers. The air reeked of stale food, sweat, and industrial runoff. Graffiti clashed and overlapped on the tunnel walls and containers, reflecting the chaotic and transient nature of the shippers' lives. As they entered another stained corridor, a fresh slogan in fluorescent green greeted them. "Space out with Hoosh."
"What's Hoosh?" asked Alvis.
"A street name for a highly addictive drug humans inhale to pretend their existence isn't real," said John, looking at a photo he'd printed out and scanning the area for matches.
"Why would people want to forget their existence?"
John stopped to look at the arty. "You mean besides spending time with you? Look at my life, I'm Exhibit A." He stepped over a snoring addict.
Alvis followed. "Yet you don't use the drug. Interesting."
"Because that's how you lose," said John. "Escaping the pain means forgetting life is worth fighting for." He pointed to a man who loitered at an intersection, his appearance starkly contrasting with the local denizens who steered well clear of him. He was dressed in a collarless black suit with no tie, his jacket open, purposely exposing the handle of a pulse pistol in a shoulder harness. A hand with gaudy skull rings on each finger pulled an e-cig from his mouth, and he exhaled a long plume of blue smoke. "That's Cade," said John, holding out the photo to Alvis. Earlier, they'd spent a few hours digging through the streams of various networks on the SatNet, looking for information on Giorgio's criminal organization. Cade Kerrigan was a name that had repeatedly surfaced, and someone for whom they'd been able to obtain a photo. Scattering a few units around the bones to Hoosiers, John was able to learn where the man did business.
"What's a criminal lieutenant doing in a dump like this?" asked Alvis. "These people seem incapable of anything more than basic human function."
"Avoiding the Moon Authority," said John. "The MA won't touch this place unless there's a corpse." Alvis scanned the area.
"This does not seem like a safe place."
John chuckled. "It isn't. Let's go." As they approached, Cade quickly marked them, shifted his position, and opened the side of his jacket, fully exposing the whole gun. "Piss off." John held up his hands. "You're Cade. You work for Giorgio, yeah?" Cade stared silently, so John forged ahead. "I'd like to speak with Giorgio about a job."
I can put my ship, Delilah, at his disposal." The lieutenant looked John up and down and snorted.
That's a Star Corps flight suit without the patches.
"So?" said John. "I'm no longer in the Corps. I'm an independent, with an empty cargo hold."
Giorgio doesn't need you. I said to piss off.
He put one hand on the handle of the gun, took a drag on his e-cig, and blew it in Alvis's face. Alvis's blue orbs glowed through the smoke. "Thank you for confirming the most predictable outcome of your personality profile." Cade frowned, trying to parse the insult. John waved it off. "There must be something he needs moved. I'll give him a better rate than any of his haulers. Besides, as you noticed, I'm a Star Corps-trained pilot. I can make the moon run faster than any of the flunkies around here he uses. That means faster profits. Tell me your boss doesn't want that." Cade drummed his fingers on the gun handle. "It's a crime to carry a concealed pulse weapon in the domes," said Alvis. With practiced precision, Cade drew the weapon and pointed it at the Artie's head while keeping his eyes on John.
"If that machine speaks again, it's gonna be slag."
"Shut up, Alvis. You're a pain in my ass, but I need you," said John, taking a friendly step forward. "Come on, Cade. Do your boss a favor. He'll probably buy you a brand new ring to show his appreciation. There has to be something I can do." Cade took another drag and blew it in John's face this time, reeking of berry chemicals and stale breath. John resisted the urge to gag, figuring it would sour his already weak bargaining position. Said Cade. What?" asked John. The man raised his wrist and tapped his holoband, opening a comm channel.
"Jimmy."
There was a pause.
"Yeah? Do we still have that issue with the cheese container?"
"Hang on." Cade continued to smoke as he watched John. Minutes passed.
"Seen any good films lately?"
asked John. The tough raised an eyebrow.
"Yeah. It was called The Guy Who Died because he wouldn't shut up."
John wondered if the guy was really this uptight or just putting on a show. In either case, John didn't like assholes or bullies, and this guy seemed to be both. "Boring. 2 stars. I prefer Overcompensating, a documentary." Cade's jaw clenched. Just then, Jimmy came back. "Yeah, why?" Cade sucked his teeth, still fingering the weapon, then tapped the holoband.
"Tell Giorgio I have a solution."
Chapter 4. Crater Cakes. Cade was silent as they walked, and John didn't feel it wise to provoke the man any further. He hoped he'd lucked out and would finally get a gig that could jumpstart bringing in more clients so he could start saving some money. Then maybe he could figure out how to earn an honest living. They returned to the more respectable main domes of the lunar colony, finally entering the Kranz complex. The dome was larger than any sports stadium on Earth and was home to high-profile businesses and some of the most posh luxury dwellings. It was also home to a small treat shop called Crater Cakes. After crossing a large open area of swanky restaurants, Kate stopped outside the small treat shop and gestured to a glass door dominated by a logo of a crescent moon cradling delicate pink pastries. The words Crater Cakes curled in fancy script above the crescent logo, with an open sign swinging lazily beneath.
"Go in,"
said Kate. The smell of sugar and cream wafted into John's nostrils.
"You're joking. You're the fucking comedian."
"Touché." John opened the door, and he and Alvis entered. Cade followed, closed the door, and flipped the sign to read, "Closed." The shop was a cozy surprise. Soft blue and pink hues, vintage pastry posters, and a few small tables with doilies and tiny flower vases. The glass display case gleamed with untouched and pristine iced confections. Behind the counter, a modest wood door read Private. There was no staff, just the quiet hum of refrigeration and the unsettling sense they were expected.
"Not too busy today, eh?"
asked John. Cade ignored him and led them to the door, gesturing for them to enter. John half expected a dark, smoky back room filled with criminals, but was surprised to see a full pastry kitchen. Something smelled delicious, and John's stomach rumbled. I was expecting criminals, not cream puffs, said Alvis. John eyed an older man with a cocoa-colored complexion who was busy baking. First it's cream puffs, then black market eclairs. It's a slippery slope. At the back of the kitchen was another door marked office. John followed Kate, taking a big whiff and feeling just for a moment like he was a kid again. What was this guy making? It smelled amazing. There was no time to find out. The next room was small, with several wall-mounted displays tuned to various streams, news, market prices, and logistics feeds. A black safe dominated one corner with stacked crates beside it. A second tough leaned against the wall near the door, dressed like Cade but with shoulder-length blonde hair and no rings. John figured this was Jimmy. The guy didn't even look at him. In the center of the room, Giorgio sat in a plush red velvet and leather chair behind a large black desk. The fat man was frowning, the crease on his forehead accentuated by one long single eyebrow nearly as broad as his head. A few greasy black curls hung over his puffy forehead, the last remnants of a head of hair attempting to remain relevant. Despite the cool temperature of the room, the man was sweating. He wore a wrinkled sharkskin sports coat over a rumpled white shirt without a tie and black pants. He wiped his face with a red handkerchief, then stuck it back in some inside pocket. "Who is this, Malacas?" asked Giorgio. "Solution to the cheese problem," said Cade. Giorgio's eyes narrowed. "He has a ship?" "I'm standing right here, Giorgio," said John. "Yes, I have a ship, and the skills to complete runs faster than any of the other numbskulls you employ." Giorgio snorted and picked his nose. "Giorgio needs competence and trust, not speed. He will tell you what is important and what are square wheels." Great. A guy who speaks of himself in the third person and uses nonsensical metaphors. The fat man opened a drawer and pulled out a device John recognized as a facial identity scanner. The expensive piece of tech was typically hooked into official ID databases and not something available to people who weren't either law enforcement or military. That's not surplus junk. He's got connections. "Nice toy," said John. Giorgio stood with a grunt. "Come closer with your stupid face so Giorgio can scan its ugliness. I imagine many girls do not think you're handsome like me." "Yeah, you're a real Adonis, Giorgio." "You are not needing to let me know. Jimmy, go get me another cream puffy." John stepped up to the desk as Jimmy left the room. "Don't move," said Giorgio, holding up the device. A green laser grid quickly scanned John's face. The big man's attention turned to Alvis. "What is this damn machine you have?" John raised an eyebrow. "That's my personal time-wasting detector. It's been going off since this conversation started. Let's get down to business." The device in Giorgio's hand pinged, and the big man hit a button. The desk surface lit up, displaying a report. Giorgio sat down and began to read. "I guess you are thinking you are a funny guy. This report about your career, now that is funny." "If you see who I am, then you know I can do the job," said John. "I'm out of the Corps. I'm a privateer now. Come on, Giorgio, let me help you with your cheese problem." Jimmy returned to the office, placed a massive cream puff on a delicate doily before the big man, and returned to stand against the wall, eyeing John. Giorgio sniffed it but didn't pick it up. "Damn, that smells amazing." "Where is Lonzo?" asked Giorgio. "Still on Europa," said Cade. "Ronce is having issues with customs at Elation. Nobody else is available for at least a day." Said Giorgio, running his finger along the length of his eyebrow. He leaned forward. "Giorgio gives you this one chance, MacAlister," he said, using John's last name from the file. "You mess up, and you end up as an ingredient in one of my cakes." I wish he'd stop talking about food. "I don't mess up," said John. "I would provide a counter-argument," said Alvis. Giorgio laughed, his eyes returning to the report on the desk. "Dishonorable discharge, disobeying standard protocols, damage to colony structures. And that was just one mission, said Alvis. Yeah, said John. That was willful disobedience, not mess-ups. There was something about cheese. Giorgio nodded to Cade as he picked up his pastry and took a huge bite. John had to avert his eyes from the cream and cherry filling wastefully spilling onto the desk, obscuring part of the report. We'll send you to a warehouse on Earth's L2, the Lagrange point. You know them? Asked Cade. I was a Star Corps pilot. What do you think? Asked John. Cade cracked his neck. It's a large warehouse in stable orbit. I know what it is, Cade. My detector is going off again. John thumbed at Alvis. Cade frowned. This one holds tons of foodstuffs for people on basic. There are 24 containers of cheese awaiting shipment, paid for and cleared. That's it? John turned to Giorgio. You really need me to pick up containers of cheese? And here I thought the pastry front was the extent of this impressive operation, said Alvis. Of course, said the man with his mouth full, scowling at Alvis. He dropped more crumbs on the desk. Giorgio is a legitimate businessman. Cheese and treat shops are only two of my many vested interests. John let out a short, disbelieving laugh. Yeah, the place here is packed with customers. What's the pay for this cheese job? Giorgio grinned. 1,000 units. What? John snorted. That will barely cover my expenses. 2,000. Giorgio is letting you into my operations. Giorgio must make sure you can do the job and that you are not some kind of flake. You see this flaky crust? Giorgio said, brushing crumbs off his desk. I can't have that in my operation. John resisted the urge to go and lick the remnants right off the surface. He knows I have to take it. I think I hate this man. Fine, said John through gritted teeth. Giorgio waved his hand at Cade. I'll give you the location of one of our warehouses on the Sea of Rains for delivery, said the enforcer. Landing pad 6 on the public transit grid. We'll meet you with a truck. I need half up front, said John. Fuel and docking fees. Cade looked at Giorgio. Give him 200, said the man, eating the last piece of the pastry and grinning. Yep, I hate him. Chapter 5. Cheese Delivery. Port Valo Customs Control. John leaned against the open cargo hatch of Delilah, trying to look nonchalant as the customs agent, a thin man with a face full of scaly skin and sharp eyes, approached. The agent's crisp Moon Authority uniform contrasted with the banged-up and cluttered interior of the port dock. Alvis stood silent and calm while John's heart pounded, his mind racing through worst-case scenarios. Damn you, Giorgio. MacAlister, right? The agent's tone was all business, with no room for chit-chat. That's me, John replied, pushing off the ship's hull and forcing a smile. I'm on a tight schedule, and I'm sure you're busy. I'm just hauling... Procedures, MacAlister, said the agent, flipping through his hand terminal. Procedures are my life. You're not trying to bribe me, are you? I would if I had the money. Of course not. I wouldn't. Cargo manifest shows you're hauling basic income food containers. Anything else I should know about? John swallowed. His career in the Star Corps had been full of highly stressful situations, but for some reason this whole thing unnerved him. Probably because he'd never been faced with the real prospect of spending time in jail. Cheese, he said, shrugging. Lots and lots of cheese. Think of it as a nightmare shipment for the lactose intolerant. He threw a casual grin at the agent. The man apparently had had his sense of humor removed. He nodded, entered the cargo bay, and scanned the posted manifest. He wandered through the containers, tapping or kicking them and looking around the cargo hold. As the man approached the container, John's stomach dropped. Stuffed with illegal pulse weapons, if the container was opened, John would be spending the next few years in a cold cell, and worse, probably trying to dodge a shiv from an inside plant by Giorgio for losing his shipment. The agent moved toward the contraband container. He needed to think fast, but he had nothing. "Excuse me," said Alvis. "Randomized Hold Inspection Directive 4.6 requires querying for a randomized inspection sequence prior to any physical interaction with cargo. Failure to pull a sequence will, of course, be recorded as a variance event and is reviewable by the Board of Agents." The agent stopped. "I know the regs." "I'm certain you do. I only mention it because you haven't pulled the sequence yet from your terminal for this bay." John said nothing. He barely breathed. He can't be making that up. How does he know all that? The agent frowned and looked at his hand terminal. A man who just bragged about procedure had just been informed by an Artie that he was about to violate one. He cleared his throat and gestured on his hand terminal. After a moment, the agent's handheld chimed, and he turned around. "I've received and logged the inspection sequence, which would place the inspection start point at manifest position 6. He pointed to the second row of crates, opposite the crate full of weapons. The agent approached it and opened it. It was full of cheese. John watched the agent work through 3 more containers of entirely legitimate and overpoweringly aromatic cheese. After he'd inspected the required minimum, he entered something on his terminal and straightened up. "Looks like cheese." He snapped the terminal shut, then paused to give Alvis a neutral look. "You're good to go. I'll alert customs control you're clear for departure." John flashed a tight smile and threw a finger gun, masking his relief. "Appreciate it, sir." The agent left the hold, and John nearly collapsed from relief. "I don't know how you knew all that, but that worked like a charm." "The regulations are publicly available. I simply looked them up. Chances were that if the agent followed protocol, he would not find anything amiss." "You gambled," John laughed. "Mr. Logical gambled our freedom. I love it." "I did not gamble. I played the odds in our favor." "Dude, look up the definition of gambling. Let's get the hell away from this dock before something else bad happens." They returned to the bridge. While John maneuvered the ship to clear customs, his relief turned to anger. Giorgio had put him in this position. The greasy bastard had either set him up to get caught or used him to try to sneak a shipment through customs without risking one of his own people. The slob was probably still laughing about it over one of his stupid pastries. John gritted his teeth, the urge to punch something rising. "Alvis, submit our approach vector and request to land." The Artie entered a command on the board. "Done. Also, you're welcome." "What?" "For saving us from that agent who was about to discover Giorgio's contraband." "Pfft, it's about time you did something to help me instead of criticizing me all day long. But if it makes you feel better, thank you. I'm merely noting the value of my assistance. You're testy when you nearly get arrested for smuggling contraband." John made a course correction and grunted. On the forward view screen, they saw the surface of the moon, the expanding colony filled with gantries and construction drones. This wasn't what he'd had in mind when he decided to become a cargo hauler. He guided Delilah toward the landing pad where Cade would be waiting, no doubt with more smug comments and veiled threats. He would play along and deliver the cargo. But he was done being a pawn in Giorgio's game. As John suited up, a truck rolled out to meet Delilah's open cargo hold. A few minutes later, he and Alvis entered the warehouse, which apparently belonged to a company called Astropack Solutions. John was sure it was some shell company for Giorgio's criminal enterprise. Cade met John inside the warehouse airlock, looking amused. "Something funny?" asked John, tucking his helmet under his arm. "We noticed you were pulled in for a random inspection," said Cade. John fumed, realizing they'd orchestrated it. "If it weren't for my quick thinking, I'd be rotting in jail right now, asshole." Cade put on an impressive show of confusion. "Why? You were only carrying cheese." "I'm certain you're aware of our full manifest," said Alvis, but John waved the Artie off. "Where is he? I want to talk to him. There's also the issue of the rest of my payment." The tough cracked his neck and grinned, then turned and gestured to a corridor leading further back into the warehouse. "Last door on the left." John found Giorgio sitting at a desk like the one in Crater Cakes, eating a giant sandwich. Of course, he had dropped crumbs all over his jacket. Jimmy was once again leaning against a wall, looking bored. "MacAlister," said the fat man with a mouthful of sandwich.
Against all odds, the fledgling smuggler returns. With my cargo, no less. Giorgio is surprised, but pleased. Bully for you. John stalked to the desk and placed his hands on it. Jimmy leaned forward, suddenly attentive. MacAlister is not pleased. I'm lucky I'm not in lockup, bastard. You snuck illegal weapons into my shipment without telling me. Had I known, Giorgio didn't want to make the tenderfoot nervous, said the criminal boss, refusing to stop eating as he conversed. Look at what a baby you're being now that you have found out. Besides, you worry over nothing. My cargo is safe and sound. I had nerves of steel in the Star Corps, running missions far more dangerous than sneaking around a single crate. The point is, I don't like being lied to. He stood and crossed his arms, realizing arguing with this man would get him nowhere. Never mind. Just give me the rest of my money. Giorgio has made the poor man sad, Jimmy. He laughed. Transfer 600 units to MacAlister and make him happy. That is not the balance of the agreement, said Alvis. My tin pal here is right, said John. You owe me 800, Giorgio. Giorgio wagged a finger. Ah, but you were late. You wasted time at customs. I must dock your pay. Business is business, MacAlister. Late? Shouted John, nearly throwing his helmet at the man. It was your fault I was delayed at customs. He noticed Jimmy was now very alert and standing within arm's reach. John figured it would be wise to calm down. Tsk, tsk, said Giorgio, shaking his head. It was only random, Giorgio is told. That does not matter. The timetable is the responsibility of the hauler, not the haulee. Should I have Jimmy transfer the money, or did you want to waste more of Giorgio's time arguing? Jimmy now had one hand in his jacket. Damn it. John reluctantly gave Giorgio a stiff nod. Jimmy took his hand out of his jacket, tapped his hollow band, and brought up a hollow window. He transferred the units to John. Good doing business, MacAlister, said Giorgio, taking another big bite of his sandwich and smiling through chunks of food. We should do it again sometime. No, it wasn't, and not bloody likely, said John. Let's go, Alvis. He stormed back to Delilah, seething with anger and frustration. He barely completed his first foray into smuggling with his freedom intact, and now he was being shortchanged on top of it. But what could he do? He leaned against the cargo lift wall and exhaled, anger draining into something that felt worse. No regret, just the creeping suspicion that this whole privateering thing might get him killed. Maybe you were right after all, Alvis. About which part? I raised several concerns. All of it. Giorgio, the bones, this whole idiotic plan. Alvis was quiet for a moment. Actual self-reflection noted. You understand that Giorgio now knows you can move contraband through a customs inspection? John looked at the Artie. So? He knows you didn't crack. That's worth considerably more to him than 200 units. Cheating us out of part of the pay was just his way of reminding us he was in control. John stared at the floor. The math wasn't complicated. He thinks he has leverage with us. I'd estimate the probability of Giorgio letting a useful asset simply walk away at somewhere near 0. John cursed under his breath. Then we'll be staying far away from him. Shall I add betrayal by pastry enthusiasts to our list of avoidable disasters? Asked Alvis. Yeah, said John, just below deciding to hire a smart-mouthed robot. He hit the cargo lift controls. The platform began to rise. Chapter 6. All in, no out. John wiped his forehead after finishing installing the replacement hydraulic actuator. He smiled as the classic album Kind of Blue by Miles Davis began playing on Allo disc, with the opening track So What filling the air. The actuator was only one of many things on his list, but it felt like a small win. He'd be able to take a cargo job now without at least worrying about this detail. Why are you always sweating? Asked Alvis. You humans are always secreting or emanating some foul substance.
John shook his head as he returned the wrench to a magnetic strip in the tool chest. Is this you helping? Because you suck at it. What's next on your list of trying to keep your sinking life afloat? You know, this could work. John pulled off his gloves. Even though this boat needs work, our margins are paper thin, and all I have to eat are frozen noodles for the foreseeable future. Still, we just succeeded in our first job. How about a little positivity for once? John knew that could was the wrong word. He had to make this work. There was no fallback after gambling his whole pension and savings on this ship. He'd tried getting civilian work, but the Star Corps discharge always got in the way. Or maybe it was the ghosts he carried, the ones everyone else seemed to see while he pretended not to. If only there was something to be positive about, said Alvis, breaking John out of his rumination. You're only operating on a few hundred units. Watching you die of starvation on the deck is not how I want to spend my time. John's mouth opened, then shut again, and a little chuckle of disbelief escaped his lips. The mouth on this thing. Maybe I should have left him in that junk auction. He considered selling the Artie for half a second. Alvis would bring a pretty penny, but this was a two-person operation. The Artie cost nothing to keep around and was useful. Sorry, bub, your job now is assistant to the head smuggler. The sooner you accept that, the better. They returned to the bridge, where John tried to get a coffee but only received a cup of oat milk for his trouble. Grumbling, he sat down and checked his posting on the backline, a loosely federated stream of freelance contracts and off-books cargo runs. There were several messages, but most were either lures to sucker him into a trap or offering fees so low as not to be worth his trouble. But there was one from a woman trying to move what she called learning supplies. It looked promising. He checked the woman out and found her profile. This could be profitable, or at least visually pleasant. There's a cargo run from Titan, said Alvis. Chemical components. Bypassing local strong-arming unions and paying over the standard rate, 2,400 units. I've already pulled the manifest. Chemicals blow up ships. Not if secured properly. John continued to read the woman's profile. You've already moved on, haven't you? Said Alvis. It wasn't a question. This one's interesting. John swiped the information to the Artie. It's a short trip so we can pick up a return job fast. Alvis looked at it for exactly the time it took to reach a conclusion. The backline isn't a dating service. Cute. Funds are tight. We need immediate cash flow. We need 2,400 units. The time spent in transit will more than pay off in capital. She was very clear about her timeline. Someone else will grab it. That's the best-case scenario. Alvis looked at him. You're not actually reading the job listing. John strapped in. He began prepping Delilah for launch. I read enough of it. You read enough of her. You're just jealous because the only romance you'll ever have is with a broken beverage scent. I give this whole affair 6 months before your ship is impounded for late fees and you're imprisoned. It's a short time for me to wait for my freedom. Your cynicism is a real problem, you know that? I have compiled a list of things that are actual problems, which doesn't include logically assessing cargo runs. Your judgment regarding women is currently third. What's first? You disregard all of my advice, which is the whole point of having me around. John snorted and brought the engines online. Outside the viewport, the moon's surface stretched gray and indifferent in every direction. Maybe you're the brains of this outfit, but I'm the guts, said John. And sometimes you have to trust the gut. That feeling is nausea, said Alvis. Strap in, Rustface. Time to pick up some learning materials. The Delilah lifted off the pad, already pointed in the wrong direction. The end. This has been Dischord, the John and Alvis Sessions, Book 0. Written by Tom Dell'Aringa. Narrated by Connor Brannigan. Text copyright 2024 by Tom Dell'Aringa. Production copyright 2026 by Tom Dell'Aringa. All rights reserved.